There's an unspoken rule carved deep into the bones of nature that the sea, with all its shadowed depths and ancient silence, must always harbor something far more terrifying than anything found on land. And for most of Earth's history, this cruel truth has held fast. Even in the age of the dinosaurs, when the land roared with monsters, it was the oceans that cradled nightmares that made the likes of Tyrannosaurus and Dromaeosaurs look almost tame. In fact, if you trace Earth's long and violent history, it's strangely difficult to find a moment when the water was safer than the land. But there was one, a brief forgotten flicker in time, long before dinosaurs ever thundered across the ground, before birds, before flowers, before even time moved the way it does now. A moment when survival whispered through the waves and screamed from the shore. This was the Lopingian, specifically the final chapter of it, known as the Lopingian Wuchiapian, or, as we'll call it here, the Lenin. You've likely never heard that name. It doesn't echo through popular science like the Jurassic or Cretaceous. But the Lenin represents something unique, a turning point between eras, playing out roughly 259 million years ago in a world that was as alien as it was ancient. Even the rhythm of the day was unfamiliar then. The moon hadn't yet drifted so far from us, and as it pulled on Earth's tides, it also pulled time itself tighter, shortening our days to just 22 hours. A strange beat for life to follow, and only the first clue that this world was not our own. And the map? Forget anything you know. There were no Americas, no Africa, no neat shapes we see on globes and in classrooms. Back then, nearly all land had fused into one monolithic continent, a vast, cracked slab called Pangaea. A singular landmass so immense that it swallowed oceans and smothered climate. To the east, fragments still floated free, the last holdouts against Pangaea's crushing grasp. Present-day Siberia, Kazakhstan, and parts of northern China formed a colossal island of sorts. Further south, another patchwork landmass emerged, the embryo of what we now know as Southeast Asia. Even modern regions like Turkey, Iran, and Tibet existed then as isolated islands caught between ancient oceans, the Tethys and the older, darker Paleotethys. But west of Pangaea, there stretched something monstrous, something unfathomable. Panthalassa, the superocean, an abyss so vast it swallowed more than 60% of Earth's surface, dwarfing today's Pacific. And what lurked beneath its waves might surprise you.
You'd think a sea, the size of Panthalassa, a world-swallowing expanse that stretched beyond imagination, would be home to monsters beyond nightmares. But in the time of the Lenin, the oceans were strangely quiet. Yes, there were still predators in the deep, sharks, for one, Earth's ancient survivors. They had been slicing through the water for over 200 million years by this point. And if you're at all familiar with this eerie slice of prehistory, one bizarre name may spring to mind: Helicoprion. This was no ordinary shark. Reaching lengths of 8 meters, nearly 26 feet, Helicoprion was a swirling enigma of evolution. Its spiral-shaped tooth whorl jutted from its lower jaw like some biological buzzsaw, a grotesque, otherworldly design no modern creature could match. It's no wonder this beast became the face of Permian marine horror. But by the time of the Lenin, Helicoprion was gone. Extinct. The poster child of prehistoric seas had vanished, leaving behind only the echoes of its bizarre design. What remained were its smaller cousins, notably Hybotus and Sphenacanthus, sharks that rarely exceeded 2 meters in length, no more threatening than today's leopard sharks. Their teeth were tailored not for battle, but for squid, soft-bodied prey, easy to tear and quick to swallow. They were hunters, yes, but not terrors. Even the once dominant Eurypterids, the so-called sea scorpions, had once ruled the Devonian seas, some growing to monstrous sizes. But now, only 2 known genera limped into the Lenin, small and unimposing, clinging to survival in a world that had left them behind. The seas, it seemed, had been hollowed out. Why? One name: the Capitanian extinction. It wasn't the most famous extinction in Earth's history, but it may have been one of the deadliest. Striking 2 million years before the Linen, it devastated life across the board, but the oceans took the hardest hit. As a result, the marine world of the Linen was eerily subdued. Trilobites, ammonoids, and brachiopods still haunted the depths, but their numbers were dwindling, their sizes modest. They were the remnants of a once thriving empire now reduced to scattered ruins. Yes, beneath the waves, the world had gone quiet. But that silence held a secret comfort, because on land, things were very different. There, in the dry breath of Pangaea's deserts and swamps, terror had returned. New rulers were rising, old orders had fallen, and Earth was about to become far more dangerous, not in its oceans, but under its blood-red skies. The land had suffered too, scorched, stripped, emptied by the same Capitanian catastrophe that gutted the oceans. But unlike the water, the Earth did not stay silent. It rebounded, violently. What rose from the ashes of extinction wasn't peace. It was something far worse. The great ruling clades of the past, the dinocephalians, once vast and powerful, had been wiped away. In their absence, a vacuum formed. And when nature leaves a vacuum, monsters crawl in. Among them was a group that would come to define the Lydianans' terrifying legacy, the Gorgonopsids. They weren't named after the Gorgons of Greek mythology by chance. Their fossilized remains, uncovered in 1876, were so grotesque, so alien, that early paleontologists could only liken them to mythic beasts that turned men to stone. And yet, they were real, horribly real. Gorgonopsids were varied, but many shared a chilling set of features: narrow, elongated skulls, forward-set eyes, and most notably, saber-like canine teeth, some of the first ever to evolve. These were the earliest saber-toothed predators in Earth's history, long before cats like Smilodon would roam the Cenozoic. But make no mistake, these creatures were no cats. They weren't even mammals. They belonged to a strange transitional lineage, Therasapsids, a group more closely related to mammals than to reptiles, yet neither. An ancient, unsettling in-between, like ghosts of evolution half-formed and fully dangerous. Gorgonopsids had been around for some time, since roughly 265 million years ago. But in those earlier days, they were small, no larger than a human foot, rodent-sized assassins in a world of giants. But when the dinocephalians fell, these once tiny predators exploded into new forms and sizes. Among them, one monster stood above the rest. Its name? Inostranvia. This Gorgonopsid, unearthed from the rocks of modern-day Russia, would become one of the most studied creatures of its kind. And for good reason. It was immense. 3 to 4 meters long, with a body stretched like a tiger but more serpentine, and a skull stretching 60 centimeters, nearly 2 feet. It was a predator built for domination. Its sabers weren't ornamental. They were armor-piercing weapons, evolved for puncturing thick hide and cracking bone. Its head, while reptilian in structure, was advanced, capable of cranial kinesis, meaning it could shift parts of its skull independently to better grip and maneuver prey. Even with relatively weak jaw muscles, Inostranvia could twist, wrench, and tear with unnerving efficiency. And it wasn't alone. Kilometers of
skull stretched longer than Inostrancevia, up to 45 centimeters, and built thick and heavy, with a bone structure that suggested brute force. Rubigia was no elegant assassin. It was a brawler, a heavyweight apex predator shaped for brutal takedowns and territorial conquest. Dozens of Gorgonopsid species roamed Pangaea, names lost in dust and time. Gorgonops tatarinensis, Viatrovia, Lycaenops. Many were smaller, but size mattered little when your teeth could puncture armor and your limbs were built for pursuit. These weren't monsters of imagination. They were real, and they were hungry. But the terror didn't stop with the Gorgonopsids. Beneath them, crawling just beneath the top of the food chain, was another dark and twisted lineage, the Therocephalians. Despite the name beast heads, these creatures were no closer to mercy. They too were theracibs, actually closer to mammals than the Gorgonopsids were. But don't let that lull you into comfort. These were not gentle ancestors. Many were just as chilling, just as nightmarish. Therocephalians were diverse. Some herbivorous, some omnivorous, many carnivorous. But the larger forms, they were unsettling. Their skulls were oversized and shaped, often with short snouts, bulging eyes, and gaping mouths lined with thin, sharp teeth like cracked glass. Even the front teeth resembled needles, perfect for piercing flesh with little effort. And unlike their saber-toothed cousins, Therocephalians are everywhere, more abundant, more numerous. They may have lacked the size, but in terms of sheer impact, of daily horror, they arguably left a deeper mark. Some likely lived in burrows, emerging from beneath the earth to ambush prey, defend their dens, or retreat when necessary. And yes, many bore fur or fur-like coverings. These weren't reptiles. They were ancient, twitching things with warm blood and twitching noses, and that somehow made them even more disturbing. But to truly grasp how relentless the lion was, you had to look lower still, to the base of the food chain. There, you didn't find peace. You found freaks. Strange, malformed survivors trying desperately not to be eaten. Among them, the dicynodonts, herbivores in name, but no less eerie. Hairless, beaked, and bearing two tusks that jetted from their cheeks like blades, they were like tortoises without shells, and with attitude. And they weren't alone. Something bigger and uglier was coming next.